Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a continuation and review from last day. Last day we talked about stoichiometry and limiting reagents, and we talked about the idea that the limiting reagent is the one that runs out first. So if we look at this question, it's the same reaction from last day. Calcium sulfate combined with sodium carbonate produces calcium carbonate and sodium sulfate. And the question says, if you have 100 grams of both calcium sulfate and sodium carbonate, how much calcium carbonate will be produced? Well, if you remember back to the example from yesterday with the sandwich and the salami was the limiting reagent because we ran out of it first. So what we need to figure out is which of these is the limiting reagent. Now, if you remember last day, we actually figured out it was calcium sulfate, but I'm going to walk through how we did that again. So when we're doing limiting reagents, we're always looking at our reagents or our reactants. Right? So calcium sulfate, sodium carbonate. And they exist in a 1-to-1 ratio. Calcium sulfate over sodium carbonate. If we look, we're given that there's 100 grams of both. So we're going to randomly pick one. We're going to pick calcium sulfate to start with. And we're going to say, okay, 100 grams of calcium sulfate. We don't want grams. We in fact want moles. So grams will go on the bottom. And if you calculate the molar mass of calcium sulfate, it's 136.15, like that. So then to figure out how many moles that is, we go and get our calculator, where is our calculator? It's hiding. There's our calculator. And we go 100 divided by 136.15, and we get 0.73. So 0.73 moles. So that means in 100 grams we have 0.73 moles of calcium sulfate, which, because it's a 1-to-1 ratio, it means we would need 0.73 moles of sodium carbonate. So the question is, do we have that much? Well, 0.73 moles, we don't want moles, so we're going to throw that on the bottom. And we're going to put grams on top. The molar mass of sodium carbonate is 105.99 grams per mole. And again, we go back to our calculator. And here, I should bring the calculator into the frame, I guess, so you can actually see it. There's our calculator. We would go 0.73 moles times 105.99 grams per mole. And we get that we would need 77.37 grams. Well, if we look back in our question here, we actually have 100 grams. So we have way more than enough. That means that calcium sulfate is going to be our limiting reagent. So what that means is we can go ahead and start our calculations to figure out the answer of how much calcium carbonate would be made using calcium sulfate. So now we're going to be comparing calcium sulfate to calcium carbonate, because calcium sulfate is our limiting reagent. And again, we see it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So we're always going to put the limiting reagent on top. That's our rule. Always put the limiting reagent on top. And then put what we're looking for on the bottom. So we know that we have, if we look back here, we remember we have 0.073 moles of our limiting reagent, calcium sulfate, over X. So 0.73 times 1 divided by 1, we are going to have produce 0.73 moles of calcium carbonate. So that could actually be our answer. How much? 0.73 moles. Or we could convert that 0.73 moles, right, times, we put moles on the bottom, and on the top we go the molar mass of calcium carbonate, which is 100.09 grams. Again, we whip up our calculator here. 0.73 moles times 100.09 grams per mole. And we find out we would make 73.06 grams of calcium carbonate. So just a quick recap, because I'm almost out of time in my video here. We figured out which was our limiting reagent, then we used that to figure out how much calcium carbonate we would make.